Welcome to the course Introduction to Urban Planning. Ever since independence, we have realized the key significance of industries in meeting our economic goals, as we had discussed in our 5-year plans. So, we today are going to look at the industries and all the requirements for its development. And particularly, we are going to look at the legal requirements for the industrial development and what are various processes involved in industrial development, from procuring license, developing land to registration. Ever since independence, we have realized the key significance of industries in meeting our economic goals, as we had seen in our previous lectures. Today, we are going to discuss about legal requirements for industrial development. Accordingly, our coverage would include objectives of India's industrial policies, institutional arrangements. We'll also look at the history of industrial policies in India, and I would request you to keep reflecting on our initial objectives, and also when we studied about contextualizing cities, how our direction has been changing, and we have been trying with learning and trying a lot of things in the process. We'll look at the foreign direct investment, FDI. Further, we'll look into national investment and manufacturing zones, NIMZ, the guidelines of it. Then we'll look into Special Economic Zone, SEZ Act of 2005. In the last, we'll look at Small and Medium Enterprise Development, MSMED Act of 2006. So this will be our coverage for today. The expected learning outcomes, which is expected after you finish this particular session, that you should be able to review the changes in the planning approach in the industrial sector, and you should be able to connect all the objectives, and you should be able to connect it with the historical journey and also see what kind of interventions we have been taking. You should be able to review the objectives of India's industrial policy, as well as should be able to describe the institutional arrangements. Further, you should be able to review the history of industrial policy in India. Likewise, you should be able to discuss the key aspects of FDI. Furthermore, you should be able to review the National Investment and Manufacturing Zone guidelines. Furthermore, you should be able to review these special economic zones. Likewise, you should be able to discuss the approaches adopted by the government to support small and medium enterprise. So moving on, now let us see the main objectives of India's industrial policies. The objectives of India's industrial policy are to maintain a sustained growth in productivity, to enhance gainful employment. So you see how employment has been an issue for us, to achieve optimal utilization of human resources, to attain international competitiveness. You may recollect how we talked about competitive cities, to transform India into a major partner and player in the global arena. Furthermore, to achieve these objectives, the policy focus is on deregulating Indian industry, allowing freedom and flexibility to the industry in responding to the market forces, and providing a policy regime that facilitates and fosters growth. Looking further at the institutional arrangements for the industries, what we see is we see Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, which we abbreviate as DIP. It is an important government organization established in 1995 to promote and regulate industrial growth and production in India. It falls under the aegis of Ministry of Commerce and Industry. The DIP was merged with the Department of Industrial Development in 2000. Looking at the key role and function of the department, we see that they are responsible for formulating and implementing the industrial policy and strategies for the industrial development. They are responsible for monitoring general industrial growth as well as the performance of industries, specially assigned to it under the allocation of business rules established in 1961. Further, we see that they are responsible for providing advice on all industrial and technical matters. Furthermore, we see that they are responsible for formulating the foreign direct investment policy and promotion through its approval and facilitation. Likewise, we see that they are responsible for functioning as a nodal department for investment related issues in bilateral regional economic cooperation agreements. Furthermore, they are supposed to encourage foreign technology collaboration at the enterprise level and formulate policy parameters towards its implementation. Likewise, we see they are responsible for promoting industrial development of underdeveloped areas of the country through international cooperation on industrial partnership. So, looking at the regional balances here. Furthermore, they are responsible for promoting productivity, quality, and technical cooperation. Looking at some of the major projects of the department, we see that it includes Industrial Infrastructure Upgradation Scheme, IIUS, and further range of industrial corridor, which you have also seen in the regional planning sessions, which include Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, Amritsar-Kolkata Industrial Corridor, Bangalore-Mumbai Economic Corridor, and so on. Moving on, let us now briefly look into the history of industrial policies in the country. We will follow the timeline provided by Professor Abhishek from his doctoral research on sustainable industrial infrastructure in India. Sustainable industrial infrastructure in India. Our work as a country for industrial development started soon after independence in 1947. Through the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948, the first policy, we defined the role of the state in the industrial development both as an entrepreneur and authority, which also classified, this particular policy also classified the industries into various categories. At that time, it identified four categories. This was followed by comprehensive enactment of Industries Development and Regulation Act, IDRA, in 1951 that provides for the necessary framework for implementing the industrial policy and enables the union government to direct investment into desired channels of industrial activity through the mechanism of licensing. The IDRA 1955 also makes provision for establishment of the Central Advisory Council and Development Councils. It also looks into the regulation of industries through the process of registering and licensing. Moving on, we'll briefly look into how the licensing is done and the process is dealt in our country. In between, briefly, we'll look at licensing concern and the process for industries in India and how this licensing liberalizes a lot of our processes. In India, industrial development license are regulated by IDRA 1951 Act and are approved by Secretarial of Industrial Assistance, SIA. Earlier, large industries that manufactured items that were exclusively reserved for micro, small and medium enterprise like MSME also needed to obtain an industrial license. However, in April 2015, the government unreserved these items to encourage greater foreign investment, incorporate better technologies, and enhance competition in the Indian and global market for the product. So these licensing requirements were relaxed. Large industries were now permitted to manufacture items, including simple as bread, pickles, and other stuff, without obtaining an industrial license. However, there are industries that require licensing for manufacturing in the country that include like tobacco items, defense, aerospace and warships, hazardous chemicals, industrial explosives. So all these things still need the license. And apart from this, there are licenses required for specific location. And we also see that these particular identified require licensing because of the environmental safety and strategic considerations. Coming back to our timeline, we just quickly looked into the licensing part. Coming back to our timeline, we further see in 1971, transport subsidy scheme was brought to improve accessibility for the industrial areas. So with transportation coming in and access coming in, there were a lot of improvement. In the year 1973, high priority industries were identified for large industrial houses, and foreign companies would be permitted in these corridors. Further, in 1977, the Industrial Resolution for Decentralization, and further in 1980, through another resolution, we see liberalization was promoted through ease of licensing with the intention to promote competition in the domestic market, technological upgradation, and modernization. So you may connect with the history part, what we saw, or you can also connect with the 5-year plan, what we were seeing, how our focus on development was changing. Further in 1977, the Industrial Resolution for Decentralization, and further in 1980, through another resolution, liberalization was promoted through ease of licensing with the intention to promote competition in the domestic market, technological upgradation and modernization, which was further upgraded in 1991 policy resolution. In the year, India opened up its economy to the world and attracted a lot of investment from international companies across sector. In 1991, industrial policy aimed to maintain sustainable growth and productivity, enhance gainful employment, achieve optimal utilization of human resources, attain international competitiveness, and transform India into a major partner in the global arena. The policy which we are seeing is focused on industry deregularization. Earlier, large industries that manufactured items that were exclusively reserved for MSME also needed to obtain an industrial license. However, large industries are permitted to manufacture items, including various stuff, without obtaining an industrial license. Market-responsive industrial development and provision for a policy regime for facilitation and growth of industry was targeted in this particular policy. Later in 2002, we see Industrial Park Scheme, which is again area-based and investment in pockets, was initiated to provide site regulations for industrial parks, areas and setbacks and procedure and approval guidelines for setting up industrial park. As per the data from Press Information Bureau, Government of India, industrial parks and industries in the country, as per the lists given, there are total 3,989 industrial park as of 1st February 2021 data, maximum being in Maharashtra 728, then followed by Karnataka 539 and Andhra Pradesh 400. You see the industrial park in this region. You see industrial park in these states. Further moving on, in 2003, Industrial Infrastructure Upgradation Scheme was introduced, and this was introduced to provide high-quality infrastructure to the existing industrial clusters through the PPP model. In 2005, we further see that Special Economic Zone policy came, which was initiated to promote and facilitate setting of Special Economic Zone, also called SEZ, through incentives and exemption, simplified compliance procedure. There would be very simple procedure to acquire anything, and ease of the process, the regular process. So the ease was given to them. Moving on, we see in 2008, there was a framework which was developed for R&D for efficient use of resources. Further, in 2009, in order to enhance the backward areas by way of funding agro-industrial policy was also made. So you can see how we are looking at the regional balance here. In July 2011, we see enhanced industrial and FDI policy. Also, we look at the national and manufacturing policy to promote and increase the role share of the manufacturing sector. So you may see that how we have still focused on the manufacturing sector. You may recollect that how in previous contextualizing cities, the global cities are moving more towards the high-skilled jobs, and they're looking at non-manufacturing jobs because of the environmental concerns. So we are right now at a stage where we are more focusing on the manufacturing jobs. However, we are moving in the other direction as well, service-oriented jobs and high-skilled jobs, and also moving towards the creative cities. Moving on, here we also see various key programs and acts which align with the industrial area planning taken from the research work of Professor Abhishek. So you can see all these area planning different schemes and acts which came up, which focused like from moving on to Factory Act to small and medium and large scale industries, and all these SEZ and SI are coming in. Moving forward, now let us look into India's policy for foreign direct investment. This one we'll slightly see in detail. We are going to look at the Consolidated FDI Policy Circular of 2020. I will walk through only selective parts of the document for broader and basic understanding. For detailed and in-depth understanding, you may look into all the detailed policy and reviews, and some are given in the suggested readings and what for you. Looking at the intent of FDI, like why FDI was we promoted FDI. FDI is considered as a major source of non-debt financial resource for economic development. And what do we really mean by non-debt financial resource? It is the resource which doesn't incur any future repayment burden for the government. So government need not return it back to the people who invest. So it's a huge relaxation for the government. In India, since liberalization, you may recollect from the 8th five-year plan, FDIs have grown consistently. FDI, as Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade document of 2020, are seen as an important component of foreign capital. FDI is said to infuse long-term sustainable capital in the economy. It is said to contribute towards technology transfer, helps in developing of strategic sectors, support innovation. It also encourages competition and creates employment, among other benefits. FDI policy pronouncements, if we see the procedure, are made by the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, that is DPIIT, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, through Consolidated FDI Policy Circular, which we are walking through. Right now we are looking at that. And these pronouncements are notified by the Department of Economic Affairs, DEA, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, as amendment to the Foreign Exchange Management Rules of 2019 under the Foreign Exchange Management Act, which is now called as FEMA, FEMA. The Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999, or in short FEMA, has been introduced as a replacement for the earlier Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. FEMA came into act on 1st day of June 2000. The main objective behind the FEMA is to consolidate and amend law relating to foreign exchange with the objective of facilitating external trade and payments, and for promoting the orderly development and management of foreign exchange market in India. FEMA is applicable to all parts of the country. The Act is also applicable to all branches, offices, and agencies, even outside India, which are owned and controlled by persons who reside in the country. So we saw the intent of the FDI, benefits of the FDI, who makes the policy. Now moving forward, we will see few definitions for us to develop a better conceptual understanding in this direction. FDI means investment through capital instruments, which means which are like shares, debentures, loans, by a person residing outside India in an unlisted Indian company. Now, looking at foreign investment means an investment made by a person resident outside India on a repatriable basis. If we look at the meaning of repatriable, refers to the ability to move liquid financial asset from a foreign country to an investor's country of origin in capital instruments of an Indian company or to the capital of a limited liability partnership. Let us now look at joint venture. Joint venture means an Indian entity incorporated in accordance with the laws and regulation in India in whose capital a non-resident entity makes an investment. FEMA, we have already seen, means Foreign Exchange Management Act. Venture capital fund, this means a fund established in form of a trust, a company including a body corporate and registered under the Securities and Exchange Board of India, regulation of 2012. So we see SEBI. SEBI means the Securities and Exchange Board of India, established under the Securities and Exchange Board of India Act 1992. Prime purpose of this is to protect the interest of investors in securities and to promote the development and to regulate the security of the market for matters connected with these. So we see how the investors are protected through this act. Then we also we have seen this particular term before as well. So transferable development rights, which means shall have the meaning assigned to it in the regulation made under the subsection of section 6 of FEMA. Now moving on, we see the investment vehicles. So what are investment vehicles? Investment vehicles mean an entity registered and regulated under the relevant regulation framed by SEBI and other authority designated for the purpose, and will include real estate investment trust as well as infrastructure investment trust and alternative investment funds. So through these channels, what comes as investment vehicle? We also see that there are few prohibitive sectors for investment. So in many areas FDI is permitted, but then we'll pay attention to the prohibited sections here. So FDI is prohibited in the businesses like lottery business, including government lottery, online lotteries and so on, gambling and betting, chit fund, Nidhi company, trading in TDR, transferable development rights. So in this it's prohibited. We further see it's prohibited in real estate business or construction of farmhouses, which can be exchanged for TDR. We see real estate business or construction of farmhouses, including real estate business, shall not include development of township, construction of residential commercial premises, roads or bridges, and real estate trust registered and regulated under the SEBI regulation of 2014. We see manufacturing of cigars, cheroots, cigarillas and so on are also not permitted. Then we see activities or sectors not open to private sectors investment are also not permitted, such as atomic energy, railway operation other than the permitted activities. So you will see those permitted activities. Further, we see foreign technology collaboration in any form, including licensing for franchise, trademark, brand name, management contract is also prohibited for lottery, gambling and betting activities. Now looking at the permitted sector. So this is a long list, so I'll just tell you the titles in which they are permitted. So you would see that these permissions are given, plus there is a limit to how much can be, how much of the investment can be done and through which channel it would be channelized. So most of them is automatic route they follow, for the sum of the sectors need to come through the government. So we see agriculture and animal husbandry, where 100% can be invested. And that include floriculture, horticulture. You can also see development and production of seeds and planting material, animal husbandry. So all these are permissible. You can also see the plantation sector, which again has 100% investment, such as tea sector, coffee, rubber, cardamom, palm oil, olive oil tree plantations, and so on. Further moving on, we see that there are selective areas in mining and petroleum and natural gas also, which have 100% FDI investment provision. Moreover, we also see the broadcasting, carriage services, and content also has provision from investment from 26 to 100%. Likewise, we see even defense industry subject to industrial license is also open for FDI, ranging from certain percent, 75 and 100%. However, for the maximum, it is routed through the government. We also see the investment is also open in the print media. We see civil aviation, airports, airport transport services, and aligned services are also open for investments. Likewise, we see construction developments, something which we are more concerned with, like township, housing, built-up infrastructure, construction development projects, which would include development of township, construction of residential, commercial premises, roads and bridges, hotels, resorts, hospitals, educational institutions, recreational facilities, city and regional level infrastructure in township. So for this, FDI is open for 100% and or has an automatic route for this. We also see that each phase of construction development project are considered as a separate project for the purpose of FDI policy. The project shall conform to the norms, so that is required that they align with the norms and standards, including something which we are concerned with, including land use requirements and provision of the community amenities and common facilities as laid down in the applicable building control regulation, bylaws, rules, and other regulations of the state government or the municipal local bodies which are connected with investment. An Indian investee company shall be responsible. So the investee company would be responsible for getting all the permissions and aligning with the laws. You may also read through the notes in the circular and see that FDI is not permitted in an entity which is engaged or proposes to engage in real estate business, construction of farmhouses, and trading in transferable development rights. Further, we see that industrial parks, new and the existing, are all 100% open for FDI. We also see satellite establishment and operation. Also, satellites establishment and operation, they are subject to sectorial guidelines, but they are open for FDI as well. You see private security agencies, telecom services, trading, e-commerce activities also. Further, something of our concern would be railway infrastructure, which is again open for some of the segments are open for FDI. You see such as suburban corridor project through private public partnership mode, high-speed train projects, which we have been seeing, dedicated freight lines, rolling stock, including train sets and locomotive, coaches, manufacturing and maintenance facilities, railway electrification, signaling system, and so on. You can see here, we can also see mass rapid transport in the list. So looking at the example, we see that a consortium of Larsen & Toubro L&T Constructions Heavy Civil Infrastructure Business and Japan IHI Infrastructure System has secured a contract to deliver 28 steel bridges for Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail corridor in the country. So that's about how the investment is also coming in the railway sector. We see that asset reconstruction companies, banking, credit information companies, infrastructure companies, securities also are open with certain ranges, as well as we see insurance, pension, power exchange, and other listed here. You can see Moving on, we will quickly look into which are the countries that invest in our nation. As per the quarterly facts sheet on foreign direct investment from April 2000 to June 2021, we see Mauritius and Singapore are among the highest with 28 and 22% of total inflow from these countries. In the FDI, which we have, highest investment is in the service sector. If we look sector wise, so the highest investment comes in the sector, 16% of total inflow comes in the service sector, and we further see that 14% comes in the computer software and hardware segment. We also see that in construction you have 5%, and construction infrastructure you see another 5% of the flow coming in. Among the states, if you look at the state, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka and Delhi are among the highest FDI attracting states, as you can see in the table here. So we broadly and selectively walked through the FDI related circular. So that was about the FDI we looked into. Now let's look into India's manufacturing policy for cluster development. So you may recollect how we, during the journey of cities and our policies, economic policies, we have seen that now we are also moving and encouraging cluster development in our approach towards planning. So we see that Government of India has announced the National Manufacturing Policy in year 2011 with the objective to enhance the share of manufacturing in the GDP and for creating jobs. The policy is based on the principle of industrial growth in partnership with the states. So the policy outlines creation of cluster and looking at cluster, we see that cluster plays a critical role in technology propagation by facilitating technological learning and manufacturing through presence of an entire ecosystem in same geographical location. So we see that 12th five-year plan of Planning Commission also suggested a cluster approach for promotion of manufacturing industries. The Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise, Government of India has adopted the cluster development approach as a key strategy for enhancing the productivity and competitiveness as well as capacity building of the micro and small enterprise MSEs and their collectives in the country. So we'll just look at the key definitions of this. You can look at how do we define a cluster? A cluster is a group of enterprises located within an identifiable and, as far as practicable, contiguous area or a value chain that goes beyond a geographical area and producing same similar products, complementary products, services which can be linked together by common physical infrastructure facilities that help address their common challenges. Likewise, further see the essential characters of the cluster. So the essential characters of this cluster includes that it should be similar in nature in terms of methods of production or the quality control and so on. Further, we see that they are identified with similar level of technology and market strategy. So either they are common in terms of technology and market. Further, we see that they are similar in terms of channels for communication among members of cluster. They have common market and skills, and then common challenges and opportunities that the cluster face. So moving on, let us see the different admissible components under the provision. Let us see different admissible components under the provision. The first one being the Common Facility Center. And common facility centers are defined as the component which would create tangible assets as common facility centers. Like the examples would include common production, processing center for balancing, correcting, improving production line and so on. Others would include design centers, testing facilities, training facilities, R&D centers. So these all things would work common and support all the industrial components which are there in the cluster. Others similar to this would include effluent treatment plant, marketing display, and all you can see in the list here. Furthermore, you see that there's also backward forward linkages of value addition in the byproduct. Waste of the cluster units would also be admissible for enhancing productivity. So these all are included in the particular common facility centers. Looking at the example, we see that here you can see CFC in pharmaceutical cluster, Karnal, Haryana. You can see the structure which has been already completed here, the infrastructure. Then you can see CFC in printing cluster, Chamrajpet, Bangalore, Karnataka. Moving on, we see the another component, which is infrastructure development. This component would cover development of land, provision of water supply, drainage, power distribution, non-conventional source of energy for common captive use, other things like construction of roads, common facilities such as first aid center, and so on. So you see that the examples of this include infrastructure developments, which you can see here how they have improved the road condition at Raj in district Sonepat, Haryana. You can see before and after picture here. You can see another example, industrial estate at Bame, West Siang, Arunachal Pradesh. You can see how they have improved the facility here. Now we look at marketing hub exhibition centers by association as another component. So Government of India assistance is extended to such kind of establishments. The another component we see is thematic interventions, which include training program, exposure visits, strengthening the business development services. So all these are included in thematic interventions, which are also another component in this particular scheme. Further, we see that another component is support to state innovation cluster development program. So we see a few state governments such as Haryana, Maharashtra, Bihar and all have initiated state-funded cluster development program to support soft and hard interventions in cluster with limited funding support. So this was about this infrastructure. Cluster infrastructure. Now we are moving towards the guidelines for NIMS, National Investment and Manufacturing Zones. We're going to look into the guidelines of this. So, Government of India notified National Manufacturing Policy in 2011. The policy is based on the principle of industrial growth in partnership with states. And this NIMS is considered one of the most important instruments of the policy. The NIMS are envisaged as integrated industrial township with state-of-art infrastructure, land use on the basis of zoning, clean and energy-efficient technology, necessary social infrastructure, skill development facilities, and so on to provide a productive environment for persons transitioning from the primary to the secondary and tertiary sectors. So how we are allowing people to move to different sectors. Moving on, we see the example for NIMS. We see that in Andhra Pradesh, they have taken certain initiative. You can see that in, you can see Chittor NIMS and you can see Prakasham NIMS here, what they have developed in the state. Now let's look at Special Economic Zone Act of 2005. India, one of the first in Asia to recognize the effectiveness of Export Processing Zone, EPZ, model in promoting exports, with Asia's first EPZ set up in Kandla in 1965. So with a view to overcome the shortcomings experienced on account of multiplicity of controls and clearances, absence of world-class infrastructure and an unstable fiscal regime, and with a view to attract investment, this particular policy was developed, and it was seen as an engine for economic growth supported by quality infrastructure complemented by an attractive fiscal package. So monetary benefits were given both at the central and the state level with the minimum possible regulations, so a lot of freedom given. SEZ in India functioned from 2000 to 2006 under the provision of the Foreign Trade Policy and fiscal incentives were made effective through the provision of the relevant statutes. So, the main idea behind this is to instill confidence in investors and signal the government's commitment to stable SEZ policy regime, and with a view to impart stability to SEZ regime and thereby generating greater economic activity. So, more and more activity will be generated and employment will be created through such kind of initiatives. So, looking at the main objective of SEZ are that to generate additional economic activity, promote export of goods and services, promote investment from domestic and foreign sources, creation of jobs, development of infrastructure facilities. So, it is expected that SEZ will trigger large flow of foreign and domestic investment in infrastructure and productive capacity, leading to generation of additional economic activity as well as creation of the jobs in our country. Furthermore, we see that this particular act plays a key role for state government in export promotion as well as creation of related infrastructure. This is seen as a single window mechanism to minimize all the procedure which is there. So, looking at the statistics, the latest statistics which we get, there are 267 operational SEZ in the country as per the list published on 2021. Here you can see how the SEZs are spread. So, now quickly looking into the micro, small and medium enterprise development, we see that MSME sector contributes to the Indian economy in a great deal. And so, in order to encourage that, this particular act came in. So, we see that it broadly classifies micro enterprise, small enterprise as well as medium enterprise here. Summarizing what we have done today, we reviewed the changes in the planning approach in the industrial sector, how different policies came in and how we started moving on from sectorial to area specific to infrastructure, and then also easing out the investment and also encouraging those investment and looking forward to creating more jobs. So, we also reviewed the objectives of industrial policies. Further, we looked into institutional arrangement. We also looked through the history of the policies. We looked into foreign direct investment. We looked into NIMS, SEZ, as well as we also looked into the MSME Act of 2006. So, that was for today. These are the references which we followed. Our coverage was limited with the scope to make you aware of the topic. There are enormous readings and movies available to explore. Few are suggested here. This is not an extensive list. You may feel free to suggest more from your experience. Please feel free to ask questions. Let us know about your concerns you have. Do share your opinion, experiences, and suggestions. Looking forward to interacting and co-learning with you while exploring cities and urban planning. Thank you.